April 1945, Leyte Gulf, Philippines. HMS Indefatigable sits at anchor, her island superstructure torn open. A kamikaze carrying a 550-pound bomb struck her flight deck on Easter Sunday, blowing in the inboard side of the island and wrecking operational equipment across 3 decks. In any previous war, this carrier would have limped home, 12,000 miles back to a British dockyard. Months out of action, months the Pacific campaign could not afford. Instead, 2 unglamorous ships pulled alongside. No guns worth mentioning, no armor, no torpedoes, just workshops, cranes, and 700 skilled engineers. 6 days later, Indefatigable rejoined the fleet at full combat readiness. The ships that made this possible were HMS Resource and HMS Artifex fleet repair ships, the invisible backbone of the Royal Navy that nobody wanted to pay for. When war broke out in September 1939, Britain possessed exactly 1 purpose-built fleet repair ship. 1. For the largest navy on Earth, operating across every ocean. The Admiralty had spent the interwar years building battleships, carriers, cruisers, and destroyers. Repair ships were a budget afterthought. The logic seemed sound. Britain maintained a global chain of fixed naval bases: Gibraltar, Malta, Alexandria, Singapore, Hong Kong, Simonstown. If a warship took damage, she steamed to the nearest base for dockyard repair. The system had worked for a century. Then the war shattered every assumption. France fell in June 1940, eliminating Mediterranean cooperation. Malta came under relentless air attack, making dockyard work there nearly suicidal. Singapore fell in February 1942, destroying the linchpin of Far Eastern logistics in a single catastrophic week. Alexandria was threatened by Rommel's advance across North Africa. One by one, the fixed bases that were supposed to sustain the fleet either fell to the enemy or became too dangerous to use. The consequences were immediate and brutal. By 1942, the Royal Navy was operating over 900 warships across the Atlantic, Mediterranean, Indian Ocean, and Arctic. A destroyer damaged by a mine off Crete now faced weeks of transit to reach a functioning dockyard. A cruiser with battle damage in the Indian Ocean had no repair facility within thousands of miles. Every damaged ship withdrawn from the front line weakened convoy escorts, reduced bombardment capability, and left gaps the enemy could exploit. The arithmetic was merciless. A ship under repair in Portsmouth for 3 months was a ship not escorting convoys for 3 months. Multiply that across dozens of battle-damaged vessels in every theatre, and the Royal Navy was bleeding combat power not through enemy action alone, but through the inability to fix what the enemy had broken. Britain was fighting a global naval war with no way to repair its ships where they actually fought. And the 1 repair ship the Admiralty did possess was never designed for this scale of crisis. HMS Resource, pennant number F79, had been built by Vickers Armstrongs at Barrow-in-Furness and commissioned in 1929. She displaced 12,300 tons, 530 feet long, 83 feet across the beam, powered by steam turbines producing 7,500 shaft horsepower on 2 shafts, giving her 15 knots. Her crew numbered 581, of whom roughly 200 were employed on repair work. She carried a pattern shop, Foundry capable of castings up to 1,000 pounds, a smithery, heavy machine shop, electrical workshops, coppersmiths and plumbers' shops, and welding equipment. Her crew nicknamed her Remorse. A 1947 assessment by the Royal Corps of Naval Constructors described Resource honestly. She was well balanced as a repair ship, larger and more lavishly equipped than necessary for routine maintenance. Yet she was inadequate for the extensive structural repairs needed to get a battle-damaged ship back to a distant base. She could handle wear and tear, she could service boilers, patch minor hull damage, and overhaul machinery. What she could not do was rebuild a warship that had been smashed by bombs, torpedoes, or kamikaze aircraft. For that, the Royal Navy needed something far more capable, and it had nothing. Resource herself served tirelessly, despite her limitations. She deployed to Malta, then Freetown in Sierra Leone, then back to Alexandria, supporting the Mediterranean fleet through the most desperate years of that campaign. She repaired Australian destroyers, fixed battle damage on HMS Kelvin and HMS Janus, and moved through the Suez Canal to Port Sudan when Rommel threatened Egypt. By 1944, she reached Trincomalee in Ceylon, preparing for the push east. Her crew never stopped working. But one ship could not sustain a global navy. The Admiralty's response was massive improvisation. Unable to build purpose-designed repair ships quickly enough, they bought 5 large Cunard passenger liners and ordered them stripped to the hull. Every cabin, every dining room, every promenade deck was ripped out and replaced with industrial workshops. The conversions took approximately 2 years each, meaning the heavy repair capability would not arrive until 1944, 5 years into the war. The first conversion was HMS Wayland, formerly the Cunard liner SS Antonia, nearly 14,000 gross registered tons. Completed at Portsmouth in August 1942, her interior was transformed into 37,000 square feet of workshop space. Overhead travelling cranes of up to 4-ton capacity ran through the smithery and plate shops. 3 additional 300-kilowatt turbo generators powered the machinery. Distillers produced 200 tons of fresh water daily. She carried oxygen and acetylene production plants, enabling cutting and welding work that Resource could never perform. HMS Artifex followed, converted from the Cunard liner RMS Aurania. She had already survived being torpedoed by U-123 in October 1941, while serving as an armed merchant cruiser. Conversion at Devonport completed in July 1944. Her workshops could sustain 700 workers simultaneously, though only 200 repair staff lived aboard. The remaining 500 were meant to come from separate accommodation ships. 3 more conversions joined the fleet: HMS Ausonia, HMS Alaunia, HMS Ranpura, the largest at over 16,000 gross registered tons. Beyond these heavy-duty ships, the Admiralty acquired 2 Lend-Lease repair ships built on Liberty ship hulls in Baltimore, HMS Assistance, and a wartime HMS Diligence, each carrying 16,000 square feet of workshop space. Canada contributed 21 maintenance ships of the Beachy Head class, each specialized for different repair tasks. Inside these floating factories, 12 fundamental workshops operated around the clock. The smithery contained pneumatic hammers, a forging press, bending rolls, and plate shearing machines. The heavy machine shop housed borers, planers, heavy lathes, gear cutters, and milling machines. The electrical workshop carried hydraulic press impregnators, armature taping machines, coil winders, and baking ovens. Specialist sections handled radar repair, optical instruments, internal combustion engines, and woodworking. The men who worked these shops were the Royal Navy's most skilled tradesmen: engine room artificers, electrical artificers, ordnance artificers, shipwright artificers. The artificer training system, established by Admiral Jackie Fisher in 1903, required a 5-year apprenticeship combining academic education and hands-on craft training. These were not ordinary sailors pressed into workshop duty. They were precision engineers who happened to wear naval uniforms. If you are finding this deep dive into Royal Navy engineering valuable, subscribing takes a moment and helps the channel produce more of these. Now, the proof. Leyte Gulf, April 1945. HMS Artifex and HMS Resource pulled alongside the kamikaze-damaged Indefatigable. The repair crews cut away the wrecked armoured plates from the island's superstructure. They fabricated replacement steelwork in the smithery. They welded new plates into position. They rebuilt damaged compartments and restored electrical systems. 6 days, not 6 weeks, not 6 months. 6 days, and the carrier was back at full operational readiness. She went on to participate in the final strikes against Japan in the Tokyo area on August 15, 1945. At the same anchorage, Artifex tackled HMS Formidable's cracked propeller shaft bulkhead, a defect that caused flooding of the stern tube compartment. Divers and engineers worked beneath the waterline to patch the bulkhead, allowing Formidable to join the Okinawa operations on schedule. Artifex then performed emergency modifications to HMS Glenurn after a catastrophic petrol tank explosion killed several crew members, redesigning the entire petrol storage system to make her safe for the passage to Sydney. The impact scaled far beyond individual repairs. For the D-Day landings on June 6, 1944, the percentage availability of ships and landing craft in the assault forces reached 97%. That figure, described in official reports as beyond all hope of attainment during the preparatory period, required 41 new end-on slips 9 broadside slips, and 27 tidal grids for major landing craft. 165 craft were under repair simultaneously, with approximately 9,000 men working on landing craft repairs at peak. During the British Pacific Fleet's operations, 123 ships were docked in Australia and 350 taken in hand for repairs, with roughly 30,000 Australian dockyard workers directly employed on British Pacific Fleet projects. The comparative picture makes British repair ship investment look modest. The United States Navy built the gold standard. By 1945, the Americans operated approximately 200 repair-type vessels across more than a dozen specialized classes. Service Squadron 10 alone grew from 13 ships at commissioning in January 1944 to over 600. The entire service force encompassed 2,930 ships and more than 500,000 sailors. Japan had precisely one purpose-built repair ship. Akashi, completed at Sasebo Navy Yard in 1939, carried 433 specialist repair engineers and 114 machine tools imported from Germany. Operating from Truk, she repaired carriers, battleships and cruisers damaged in the Solomons campaign. But on March 30, 1944, aircraft from Task Group 58 sank Akashi at Palau. She was irreplaceable. After her loss, every damaged Japanese warship had to return thousands of miles to home island dockyards, consuming scarce fuel and exposing itself to submarine attack during transit. Japan's inability to repair ships forward contributed directly to the collapse of its naval capability in the war's final year. Germany's Kriegsmarine operated roughly 4 repair ships and 8 U-boat flotilla tenders. When Tirpitz needed repair after the midget submarine attack in 1943, engineers had to work in a Norwegian fjord, making the battleship a stationary target for repeated air attacks. The concentration of vessels near limited repair facilities paradoxically increased their exposure to bombing. Britain occupied the middle ground. Fewer repair ships than America, but a logistics philosophy that proved decisive compared to either Axis power. The key British disadvantage was timing. The liner conversions took 2 years each, meaning the heavy repair capability arrived only in 1944, just in time for the Pacific commitment. The key British advantage was adaptability. In February 1944, the Admiralty sent Rear Admiral C.S. Daniel to the United States to study the American Service Squadron concept. The British had to learn what one officer called a new art with extraordinary speed. The fleet train, designated Task Force 113 under Rear Admiral Douglas Fisher, grew to comprise 94 ships, supporting 142 fighting ships. Over 300,000 tons of shipping, built or converted since early 1944. Among the more colourful vessels was the amenity ship HMS Menestheus, which carried a 350-seat theatre and a brewery producing 250 barrels of beer per week using distilled seawater. The fleet train was, by its own officers' admission, the most extraordinarily motley collection of shipping ever assembled in British maritime history. But it worked. The strategic verdict is clear. HMS Resource entered the war as a lone, somewhat inadequate vessel. She ended it as part of a floating industrial complex that sustained the Royal Navy across 12,000 miles of ocean. The fleet repair ships never fired a shot in anger. They carried no battle honours. Their names appear in no victory dispatches. No captain of a repair ship ever received a knighthood for services rendered alongside a damaged carrier. Yet without them, damaged warships would have spent months limping home for dockyard repair instead of days alongside a floating workshop. The cost of converting a Cunard liner into a repair ship was a fraction of the cost of building a new destroyer. But the strategic return on that investment was immeasurable. Every carrier returned to action in less than a week was a carrier the Japanese could not discount. Every destroyer patched up at a forward anchorage was a destroyer still escorting convoys. Every cruiser with her machinery overhauled without entering port was a cruiser still projecting power where it mattered most. The post-war Royal Navy quietly forgot this lesson. Fleet repair ships were paid off and scrapped throughout the 1950s and 60s. When the Falklands War erupted in 1982, the Navy had no dedicated repair ship at all. A civilian oil rig support vessel, Steiner Seaspread, was requisitioned and sailed south, performing what official reports called miracles of improvisation in her floating workshop. Her sister ship was later purchased by the Ministry of Defence and commissioned as RFA Diligence. That ship served for over 3 decades before being retired in 2016. No replacement was ordered. As of today, the Royal Navy possesses no dedicated fleet repair capability whatsoever. The lesson HMS Resource and her sister ships taught is as old as naval warfare and as current as tomorrow's crisis. The fleet that can repair its ships where they fight will always defeat the fleet that must send them home. Japan learned this at the cost of Akashi and the war. Britain learned it through desperate improvisation, converting ocean liners into floating factories, because peacetime budgets refused to fund what wartime necessity demanded. Resource displaced 12,300 tons. She carried no armor. She made 15 knots. Her crew called her Remorse, and she kept the Royal Navy fighting from the Mediterranean to the Pacific, when the grand warships she serviced could not have survived without her. The specifications prove it. The 6-day repair of Indefatigable confirms it. British naval excellence was never only about the ships that carried the guns. It was about the ships that kept those guns firing.